It was the fall season, and the cool air of the evening mixed with an eerie fog that rolled in from the valley. The fog was thick, so thick that I could barely see more than a few feet in front of me. I had just finished a long day working on the farm, and like most nights, I decided to take a drive to clear my head. My old truck sputtered to life as I shifted into gear, leaving behind the sounds of the rustling trees and the faint calls of crickets. The road leading to my house cut through a dense forest, a winding stretch where the fog seemed to settle heavier than anywhere else. It was a lonely stretch of land, and the isolation always gave me a certain comfort. But tonight something felt off. I hadn't planned on driving too far, just around the loop near the old bridge and back home. But the fog was so thick it was almost impossible to see past the headlights. As I continued down the road, the only sounds I could hear were the tires crunching on the gravel beneath me and the occasional howl of wind brushing through the trees. About a mile into my drive, I noticed something unusual. In the distance, I saw what appeared to be a figure standing in the middle of the road. At first I thought it might be a tree branch or some animal, but as I got closer it was clear that there was someone standing right there, just beyond the reach of the headlights. It was a tall man dressed in old tattered clothing. His back was to me, and he stood completely still as if frozen in time. I slowed the truck down, cautiously approaching the figure. Something about the sight of him gave me a deep feeling of unease. The man didn't move. Didn't even acknowledge the truck approaching from behind. As I came to a stop, the engine idling softly, I called out, "Hey, are you all right?" I asked, my voice shaky. There was no response. The fog swirled around him, making him appear even more ghostly. I leaned out of the window, squinting in an attempt to make out his face, but the fog obscured any details. It was as if he was a shadow, just a silhouette against the hazy background. Then, without warning, he turned slowly. His face was pale, almost lifeless, and his eyes were hollow, black like deep pits. I froze. The world seemed to go silent, and for a moment I felt like I was trapped in some strange nightmare. His mouth didn't move, but I could hear a voice in my head, clear as day. "Get out of here, leave." It wasn't a spoken word, it was more of a thought. But it was unmistakable. I didn't need to be told twice. My heart raced as fear shot through me like electricity. My instinct screamed to drive away, but my hands were trembling so badly that I almost couldn't grip the steering wheel. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, I slammed the truck into reverse and backed away quickly, turning around and speeding down the road, all the while keeping my eyes on the rearview mirror. For what felt like an eternity, I couldn't shake the image of that man's eyes, hollow and empty, staring back at me. I glanced in the mirror every few seconds, but there was nothing behind me. The fog remained thick, and the night was silent, except for the hum of the engine. It wasn't until I reached the main road, far away from the woods, that I began to calm down, the tension in my body slowly fading. I pulled over to the side of the road, took a deep breath and tried to make sense of what had just happened. I told myself it was probably just a trick of the fog, maybe some traveller who had wandered out into the road and didn't notice me until I was right on top of him. But the image of his eyes haunted me, and the feeling of dread lingered, gnawing at me. I knew something wasn't right. As I turned around to head back home, I noticed something strange. There were no tire tracks on the road. No sign of my truck's journey at all, just the fresh layer of fog settling back into place. I stopped the truck, and for a moment I considered going back, but the feeling of danger was overwhelming. The following days didn't help ease my nerves. I couldn't shake the memory of the man, and my thoughts kept wandering back to the road. I decided to go back and check the area, hoping to put my mind at ease. But when I reached the spot, I found something that made my blood run cold. There were no footprints where he had been standing, no trace of anything at all, just an empty stretch of road covered in thick, rolling fog. I stood there, staring at the spot, my breath quickening as the realization set in. There was no way anyone could have been standing there. The road was never travelled by foot, and no one lived for miles around. I returned home more convinced than ever that I had encountered something unnatural that night. Since that evening, I haven't been able to shake the feeling of being watched, the cold, hollow stare of that man lingering in my mind. Sometimes, late at night, when I look out the window of my house, I swear I can still see him standing in the fog, watching from the woods. This experience taught me something I'll never forget. Sometimes the fog hides things that are better left unseen, and the road less travelled can lead you to places you'll wish you'd never gone.